Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. I'm continuing my coverage on Hurricane Helene. And in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple of personal stories, people that reached out to me with their perceptions and what they experienced. My heart goes out to everyone that has been affected by this devastation. It is like terrorism in that people are affected so deeply. People are looking over their shoulder with dread, fear, and anxiety, wondering about what is going to be inflicted upon them next. Now, coming from California, where we are used to fires burning all around us, and I can see that I'm freezing a little bit here. Coming from California, where the state seems to always be on fire, there is kind of an ongoing anxiety of who's next. So I just wanted to continue my coverage for you. I did a video earlier this week with Dane Wigington from Geoengineering Watch because he had this transmission signal showing the odd pattern of Hurricane Helene. And many of you have written to me with information about the strange coincidences of the previous Hurricane Helene. And yes, that is very odd and strange, but what I want to talk about are some of the personal stories. In the following video today, I'm going to bring to you information about my own experience in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, because it was actually 19 years ago, almost to the day, when I was there doing animal rescue work. So I want to share a little bit with you in terms of hurricanes, the hurricane aftermath, and what I went through. The first thing I want to do before I do any of that is to let you know, because some of you were asking how you can prepare, and I haven't spoken about this for a long time. So let me just take you on over to preparewithpeggy.com. And this is the food that I actually have. It is has a 25-year shelf life, and you can get a 4-week emergency food kit and you can save $50. Now, these are not foods that I eat on a regular basis. I don't eat pancakes and macaroni and cheese and packaged foods, but I do have one of these containers. We actually have them in our preps, and we've got one for each person in the family. You can grab and go. And I understand that for some people, their houses were hit very quickly. But if you have the opportunity to evacuate or do your bug out bag, or you have a place where you can go, this is what I recommend storing. This is the difference between life and death. If you're not going to starve, then you'll have this food and you won't starve. So I love that it's a 25-year shelf life. I love that you can save money on getting the kit. So if you are at all interested in just having this, but in some manner prepare, go to preparewithpeggy.com if you want to do this shortcut like I do it, or just stock up your stores. Make sure that you've got flashlights, batteries. The most important thing for me is that you've got your cell phone numbers off of the cell phone. So let me share with you a couple of emails and communications that I got. So this is from a Healthy American, and she actually lives in South Carolina, but was traveling to North Carolina, had no idea that this area was going to be hard hit by the hurricane. Everyone had their eyes on Florida, on the west coast of Florida. I guess it's called Big Bend area. And she wrote and said that they lost all cell signals for over 24 hours. They couldn't even call 911. So imagine, that means you don't have any phone numbers if you're like most people and you rely on your cell phone to be your address book. Why not take those important addresses and phone numbers actually out of your cell phone and write them down on a piece of paper? Keep that with you in your wallet. That way, if you're able to get to a phone and you can call someone, you'll have that as part of your preparation plan. She also wrote there were power outages everywhere. And she was in the mountains of North Carolina, not even realizing the devastation. And she was just texting me saying, oh my gosh, Peggy, this hit us out of the blue. We don't really know where we are. We were staying at an Airbnb over the weekend and had no idea that this was going to happen. She said, we can't use our cards and we have to use cash. There is a second prep tip to always have cash. I've spoken about cash on this channel many times, where you want to make sure that you're not just operating on your cards. And this is why we need to keep cash alive. I will probably replay one of my videos about cash in an upcoming next week or later, because it's so very important to keep cash alive. She said she saw EVs, electric vehicles that were stranded and couldn't be charged. She wrote, "We saw a guy in a Tesla looking for somewhere to charge his Tesla, but there was no power anywhere, so none of the chargers were working." So friends that have the electrical or electric vehicles, make sure that you have another car. And maybe your electric car is just for running errands around town. But think about that. We've seen people evacuating and the cars being stuck on the freeway because they ran out of the battery. So it's certainly not a solution for long-term driving. Now, I know that you are aware of this because I've spoken about electric vehicles at length and the issues with how expensive they are, how they're not zero emissions because building them cost emissions. And then in my video all about lithium in North Carolina, that interesting connection, I did that video for you yesterday, that also is promoting this idea of turning to electric vehicles. So I thought it was interesting that people experienced the downside of not being able to drive these things. She wrote, "We don't really know how we're going to get home. There are so many road closures." This was a couple of days ago. Asheville was the hardest hit. There are lots of floods all throughout South Carolina and North Carolina. Charlotte is a huge city. I don't know how hard it was hit, but it is a super into the New World disorder, she wrote. And so anyhow, I wanted to read you a little bit more because she said, it's very interesting. She said, "I live in a city where they shut down over the most tame weather. It will be calling for strong wind or just a rainy week, and they'll cancel the schools and people panic and they buy things to prep." And this is in the Carolinas. She said, "But nobody really did that with this storm, and it definitely felt like people believed it was only going to impact Florida and possibly Georgia, so they weren't in a panic because the news did not call or cause chaos before the storm." She said, "I also know someone who had their entire family in Tampa evacuate to another house in Boone, North Carolina, but Boone was affected by the storm, so it definitely caught all of the North Carolinians off guard." So I find that very, very troubling. She goes on to write, "Charlotte is a huge city. I don't know if it was hit hard by this, but there is some flooding and power outages. And I am curious why Asheville and Chimney Rock were hit, because those towns got absolutely destroyed and Chimney Rock town is totally wiped out." So she was suspicious, like many of us are, in terms of, are these areas being targeted so that they can usher in the New World disorder? I did my video for you yesterday about the 10-minute cities that North Carolina wants to do. All right, here is another eyewitness. And he wrote, "I am an Appalachian man in my roots, a boony mountaineer. And I got to tell you, there ain't never been a storm like that in the area." Now, he didn't email me directly, but somebody sent this to me. "I got many contacts in the area still, and it's bad enough to where people who hate us are going to use this as a talking point to hate us further. If there were a conspiracy theory to be pondered, Appalachia has often seen itself as independent from the federal government, and that in times of hardship, if they befell, the Appalachians would be one of the best refuges in the country to run to. Now, with most of its infrastructure and small town America, isolationist villages wiped out, you really got to ask yourself if someone was targeting one of the last pieces of resilience in America. The people that live in this area are prepared, but all of their preps, meaning everything that they had stored up, and their way of life are now washed away. They are the ones that would have fared better and helped their neighbors in a situation. It is now all gone. The coming winter climate and terrain will make rebuilding slow in this area." So that is so troubling. And I've got another email that came into me directly, and this is from a Healthy American. He says, "Hey, Peggy," and this came in over the weekend. "Hey, Peggy, I have lived in the Tampa Bay area of Florida for 12 years. I've seen numerous hurricanes, but nothing like this. The storm surge wasn't just record setting. It was nearly nearly biblical, he writes. The damage from flooding and destroyed pieces of shoreline is reprehensible, with storm surge over 15 feet in the Perry, Florida landfall zone. It was over 7 feet above in the Tampa St. Pete area, far and away the worst we've ever seen. Helene was not a normal hurricane, he writes. Its development track and rapid rise to Category 4 was noteworthy, but a Category 4 should not have been able to do this kind of damage. Dane Wigington just released a video. I haven't watched it yet, but I will do so in the next 24 hours. If you have the opportunity, it would be great to hear your perspective in a podcast. If you can make it happen, it would be instructive to have Dane on your podcast again regarding Hurricane Helene. It's important that your audience understand the truth. The cabal is attempting to tie this to global swarming, as I call it. And then he writes, this is pure nonsense. All the best, Mark. And then I wrote back and I said, thank you, Mark, for writing and sharing your important observations. I hope you and your loved ones are unscathed. It's terribly distressing to see this damage that has been inflicted upon so many. I'll dig into it for sure. And then I wrote again and I said, good news, Dane will be back on Tuesday. So I aired that video and interview with Dane. And he says, thank you so much, Peggy. That's fantastic. So the reason why I'm sharing these personal perspectives with you from Healthy Americans is it is just, when we break it down to the individuals who are experiencing this, it's absolutely heart-wrenching. Now, I luckily have not been the victim of a fire or a flood or a hurricane personally, but in my upcoming video, I'm going to speak about what I experienced in the aftermath of the hurricane. And even though I was not personally affected, I feel like even today, I am still traumatized by what I experienced. So that just goes to show the widespread devastation that is inflicted upon people with these types of events. And yes, I say inflicted upon them. Certainly, you could make the case that this could be a natural occurrence. There have been devastating storms long before weather was manipulated. But looking at some of these bizarre anomalies, I guess that is sort of redundant because these anomalies are bizarre. It does make you question why these areas were the hardest hit. Check out my videos about the 10-minute cities, and then check out my videos about the lithium mining right outside of Asheville. And then let's connect the clots, shall we? The best way to be prepared, in my view, is to get right with God, to live every day as a gift of life. No one is promised a tomorrow. And to have your preparation in order, to have an emergency plan, to know how to contact your loved ones, to have enough gas in the car, water, fuel, everything that you need. There are plenty of reputable prepper channels on YouTube and lots of podcasts about that. So I also have done some videos in the past. So my prayers and heart and thoughts are with all of those affected. And then stick with me for my next video, and we're going to talk about what I went through in Hurricane Katrina